Let me bring in Bill Taylor, person we turn to a lot when it comes to understanding the politics and the war inside Ukraine and what this means. So, Bill, look, I don't think anybody expected this NATO meeting to be the meeting where Ukraine got its official invitation. If you're President Zelenksyy, as frustrated as you are that you're not getting the, look, once you win the war, you're in, which is what I think he wants to hear, but he's getting almost everything except that. Is this still a successful meeting for Ukraine as far as you're concerned?
I think it is, Chuck. I think it's a successful meeting. You're right. President Zelenksyy wanted to have something a little more firm, a little more definite about what happens, how he gets in, how Ukraine gets into NATO. He's had this promise since 2008 that you've talked about a lot, where the NATO alliance said that Ukraine and Georgia would become members, but they never said how or when. And so President Zelenksyy wanted something firmer than that, much more concrete. And I think he got some of that. I mean, there was the mention of membership. There was a mention of invitation. There was the hedge about conditions and when everybody agrees. But nonetheless, President Zelenksyy comes out with a clear direction. Plus, Ukraine dominated this summit. Ukraine was the story of this summit in Vilnius. Right. And so that was, I think President Zelenksyy can be pleased with the outcome of this summit.
Let me ask you this, just talking strategically about NATO and the rest of Eastern Europe. If Ukraine becomes a full member in the next 5 years, who's left? There's going to be some countries who maybe who wouldn't necessarily look as if they're prepared to be NATO nations, but they're going to be sitting there going, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm thinking of Moldova. You threw in Georgia. What's your sense of what happens to these smaller Eastern European countries?
Smaller East European countries, as long as they're in this gray zone, Chuck, that you're talking about, are vulnerable. Ukraine is still vulnerable. Let's be clear. Until Russia gives up on empire, until Russia gives up its imperialist instinct that it's had for 300 years, until that's gone, there's still a threat, which is why the other thing that came out of this summit from the G7, which again will make Zelenksyy very pleased, are these guarantees of weapons and security, a security guarantee that means that that will help them defend themselves against a long-term threat from Russia until Russia is no longer an imperialist empire.
One of the, I think, more remarkable developments has been the growing U.S. political support for NATO, for getting Ukraine into NATO. I saw Nikki Haley talk about it, so you have some Republican presidential candidates talking about it. We know there's plenty of Democrats now in support of this. Just, if you're Zelenksyy, is it knowing that the U.S. basically is there, and you really just need to lobby the rest of Western Europe, which is probably going to be the tougher sell? Isn't that progress for him?
That is progress. That is progress. But actually, Chuck, it's interesting. And in the lead up to this summit, it was not the U.S. that was leading the charge for being forward-leaning. We were not the most forward-leaning member of the alliance. It turns out that a lot of the European allies, NATO allies, were eager to go a little bit farther than they actually ended up going. And the United States and Germany actually were not so forward-leaning on this thing. So it turns out that, yes, this summit has demonstrated strong support for Ukraine from the Europeans in the first instance. And then you got to believe that everything that President Biden said, the G7, the summit discussion, the bilateral, demonstrates that Biden is there, that the Biden administration is all in on Ukraine victory.
Look, I'm not going to sit here and make you try to predict what's going to happen inside the Kremlin. But if Putin's hold on power is as weak as it is, NATO expansion, I mean, if he were truly vulnerable to, say, voter sentiment in Russia, and we don't know that, we obviously don't believe that he is, this is a weaker Russia today than it was yesterday. So in theory, Putin should be in some serious political trouble. I assume this creates more internal conflict for him.
It must create more internal conflict. And just this last couple of days is exactly what you say. But remember the last 2 weeks, when he was challenged by a mutiny, by an possibly attempted coup. So, yeah, he's worried about his own safety, his own security, his own stability of his own regime. Yeah. And so he's not able to focus on the war in Ukraine. So yes, I think he's weaker. I think Ukraine has the advantage, has the morale advantage as it's always had. And now it's even more with a weaker Russia and a stronger NATO supporting them. So, yes, I think Mr. Putin is in trouble.
Well, Bill Taylor, it's always good to get your perspective on these. He's former ambassador to Ukraine and, of course, a big part of the U.S. Institute of Peace, focusing on Russia and Ukraine. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.